Hey everybody, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. And I was just about to head off to Berlin to go to TwitchCon, and then Wargaming with absolutely no warning were like, yeah, you want the 1.5 test server? Do you want to play the brand new Tier 10 Swedish medium tank? Do you want to check out the vehicle with the best gun depression on any high tier tank in the game? Do you want to play the UDES 1516? I had to, right? And how could I leave for Berlin without also getting a preview of the vehicle for all of you on YouTube? And as I'm going to highlight in this video, this might be the new king of the ridgeline at tier 10. So the first thing to mention about the UDES 15 is that it's actually really hard to compare this vehicle to any other tank in the game. And that's because as it stands, and remember, this is early days of the test server and everything is subject to change, its 120mm main armament has 440 alpha damage, which puts it right up there with things like the 121 or alternatively the Object 430U. However, spoilers, unlike that tank, while it says it has 6 degrees of gun depression here, let me tell you that this vehicle actually has a hydro-pneumatic suspension, a lot like you would have on the Tier 10 Swedish tank destroyers, which actually means that this vehicle can get up to 13 degrees of gun depression when it is using the full extent of it. So consequently, this means that this is a high alpha damage medium tank with something that none of the high alpha damage tanks have, and that is top tier gun depression, better than the Kranvang, better than something like the Comet at tier 7. 13 degrees is absolutely monstrous, and it allows you to use this thing in positions that no other tank at high tier can manage to fight out of. But none of this would mean anything if it didn't have the damage to be able to deal in that position, and thankfully this has got the best rate of fire of any large caliber medium tank gun in the game, with 2,808 base damage per minute. And while that might not be as good as something like the Object 140, for example, which is packing 2,909, when your alpha damage goes up from 320 to 440, you can be a lot more effective at dealing that damage, unless you're having to maybe keep something tracked or alternatively lock down some low health vehicles one by one. Now, while this is all great, some things that do suck about this tank are the shell velocity. 1,000 meters per second. Oh god, on its standard APCR rounds, that is horrible. And unlike some ridgeline warriors like the Centurion Action 10, which packs nearly 1,500 meters a second shell velocity, you're gonna have to be giving some lead at long range. And don't think you can fire premium rounds with this vehicle and have a definitive advantage, is because the heat rounds, while the penetration does go up to 310, which I should stress is not the best for heat rounds, your shell velocity dips down to 840. Rather awkward for sniping at very long distances, unless of course you can give good lead. So how about the gun handling of this vehicle? Is the UDES 15 going to be top in class when it comes to gun handling as well? Well no, not really. 2.2 seconds aim time, not as good as the Centurion Action 10 or the 140, and while its turret traverse dispersion is great at 0.1 for a large caliber gun, it's not brilliant compared to some of the lower caliber guns. And the vehicle's dispersion when moving at 0.14 is as bad as the 121, for example. But holy mother of gun elevation, 20 degrees, and as I mentioned, it's not 6 degrees, it's actually 13 degrees when you're using the full hydro-pneumatic suspension. So how about the mobility of the UDES 15? Well, 50 kilometers an hour forwards, it's the slowest in this class, slow like the Object 430U, and the power to weight ratio, while it's great, the vehicle has by far the worst ground resistances. And so this thing, it's definitely not the new mobile sniper. It's not going to be replacing a Leopard 1, for example, or even a Progetto 65. It kind of feels a lot like the speed of a Centurion Action 10, but of course when you get to that ridgeline, you have that little bit more impressive combat capacity. So how about the armor? Well, when you look at the actual raw thickness of this tank's armor, it looked like it was horrific, right? 50, 50, 30, 100, 40, 20. Oh god, that's half or even a third of the other tanks in this comparison. But as we're going to be seeing in the gameplay, sometimes it's not about how thick it is, it's about how well angled it is. And when you've got a turret like this, and your enemies are going to be shooting up at it, unless they can hit you directly in the gun, be able to enter behind, a lot like when you're shooting at a Stridsvagn 103B, for example, this turret is pretty gnarly when you're using your 13 degrees of gun depression. A passing mention should be made to the fact that this vehicle has 1,950 hit points, which is fairly standard compared to the other vehicles in this comparison, but when you compare it to something like a TVP T50/51, a Batchat, or even the Progetto 65, it has 150 hit points advantage. So this is not a glass cannon medium tank, so to say, and is definitely more in line with vehicles like the M48 or the Centurion Action 10. And finally, we must mention the fact that the view range of this vehicle is 390, which is the lowest of any of the tier 10 medium tanks, and you're definitely going to want to take coated optics on this vehicle, or have an insanely skilled crew and be willing to only get up to about 450 meters view range if you want to use vents instead. I wouldn't recommend that. But anyway, I think that's quite enough jibber jabber. Let's take it out onto the battlefield. So here we go, we are rolling out on, of course, Ghost Town inside the UDES 15, and right from the get-go, let's take a look at this absolute unique model. What is on the back of this tank? I have no idea. Somebody let me know. Somebody was saying they were filters. I think they're a place where the Swedish people are going to store, I don't know, all of their plunder from, you know, the Vikings, possibly. Do you think they store their pancakes in there, maybe? Meatballs? I think it's a meatball storage. Anyway, I'm kind of trying to distract you from the fact that, check out the mobility of this vehicle. It's not slow, but a lot of people, when they saw this tank for the first time, and myself included, thought, it's not exactly fast, is it? It looks like it's a kind of tank that should be able to race into position. Kind of looks a lot like a Bat Chatillon, but it's definitely not fast like a Bat Chatillon. Its power to weight ratio is not incredible, and it doesn't have that kind of great top speed. Now, one thing I'll mention is that you saw that, well, the tank's gun depression doesn't actually look very good as we go up over the slope there. And that's because this vehicle has a funny way for the tank to enter its siege mode. Now, keep an eye on this icon. They're kind of like the crosshair here, which actually means that the tank is entering its siege mode. And then you'll check out that now, look at the gun depression now, boys and girls. Oh, yeah. When you actually see this marker, that means that your gun depression increases from 6 degrees all the way up to 13 degrees, and that allows you to be able to get your shots in against your opponents. And look at this! Look at this! Look at this kind of gun depression. It's absolute insanity. To have 13 degrees right now is just ludicrous, but wow, are you kidding me indeed? How did we bounce that shot? And how have we already bounced 840 damage from the enemy team, even though they're firing heat rounds right now and APCR rounds? And that's because this vehicle's armor is ludicrous. In this position, unless they have a really large caliber gun, like a 151mm caliber gun or larger, then they're not able to penetrate me. It's as simple as that. They can't overmatch my frontal armor. I'm trying to get around the side of this guy right now. Like, why doesn't he just realize I'm trying to get a back round him? Okay, that's a bit weird in that scenario. Hopefully I'll be able to go through the... Somebody pinch me indeed. We can't penetrate the side of this UDES' turret, and that's because this thing's turret armor is legendary. I couldn't believe it. I thought, on paper, 50mm of armor, 100mm of turret armor, this thing isn't going to work. But when it's so darn well angled, you literally just, you can't penetrate the front of this tank unless you've got a large caliber gun. Keep an eye on how bad the shell velocity is on this tank. It definitely doesn't feel like I'm playing a medium tank sniper at long range. Of course, if we get a nice, easy shot into the lower plate, that's going to go in. And that's the first round that's actually entered our vehicle. But we're managing to take some serious chunks out of our opponents here. And unlike the enemy, UDES 15 here, we are actually firing standard rounds, and we're not just trying to YOLO the heat in, because I wanted to see how this vehicle's armor would work against APCR. And as we're clearly seeing, it's great against APCR, and it's also great against heat. Now, notice that, even though I have got this vehicle fully pimped out, I've got crew skills, I've got bond equipment, I've got everything. Not the best accuracy and not the best gun handling, right, especially when you're moving. And so definitely keep that in mind, that this is not some kind of new hotshot sniper. It doesn't feel like a different tier 10 medium tank with regards to its capacity to fire on the move or to just keep things going. I'd rather play something like an Object 140, for example, if I wanted to try and hotshot snipe at long distances with the APCR rounds. Now, if you're wondering what I'm doing here, this was basically the test server completely lagging out. And I thought, is my stream still going? As I was live streaming this, and I go, whoa, okay, yeah, we're back, great. Test server pretty much died there, but we're back in the game now. And so that was the UDES 15 in possibly the ultimate scenario for the vehicle. You're up on a ridgeline, you get to use your gun depression, you get to keep your frontal armor towards your opponent, and they don't ever manage to hit you reliably in the lower plate. Oh yeah, if you can get this tank up into that position, it's almost as if you've got kind of like a Soviet heavy tank up there. But the difference is that you kind of have the gun depression to be able to shoot out from the position. Somebody pinch me indeed. Yeah, okay, great. I think we get it. We get it now. Okay, let's hope we don't hear that voice anymore. It's a little bit distracting. But against this E100, look at that gun depression. It's wild. It's just absolutely wild. Hold on, let me see if I can just leave the sniper mode here so I can show you exactly what we're packing here. What is the E100 going to do in that scenario? The heat round enters me from the other UDES, but just look at that gun depression. It's ridiculous. Now, whether this thing is going to be balanced or not, I'll leave that up for you to decide. And I guess Wargaming Statistics Department are going to be able to tell us. Now we're not actually using our gun depression, however, you can see how the vehicle's armor is falling apart. And the UDES 15 on the enemy team is making good use of heat rounds, catching me out in the open, and he's doing some serious damage to me. This thing's got 2,808 base DPM. Oh, we hit him on the move in the tracks, and our friend supporter set him on fire. We get 1,000 tracking off there, and we even managed to bounce his heat round. And that's one thing that I think this vehicle's going to be able to do quite well. I'm not sure if any of you play the Progetto 65, the tier 10 Italian medium tank. Ah, yeah, shut down. Felt good to be able to get that guy at the end of the game. But the Progetto 65 is one of those tanks that always just manages to get miraculous bounces. Unless you really aim in at the lower plate, or you're shooting down on its upper hull armor, or you manage to get the side, it does feel like an incredibly awkward vehicle to penetrate. And this is no exception. The UDES 15, with its well-angled armor, definitely isn't great if it's caught out in the open, definitely isn't great if somebody's shooting down on it, but I'll be just happy to drive around at 50 kilometers an hour with this thing, wiggle left and right, and as long as I'm not getting shot by anything that has a really large caliber gun, like a tank destroyer with 151 millimeters, then I'm going to be bouncing for days in this tank. So one thing I'd like to mention about the hydropneumatic suspension that this vehicle has, which allows you to change your gun depression from 6 degrees up to 13 degrees, is that unlike the Stridsvagn 103B, where you have to press your X key, or for me, I've rebound it to one of my mouse side buttons, it's automatic. The vehicle automatically enters this siege mode. Whenever you are going at 23 kilometers an hour, you will leave it, or less than, you will enter it. And while I've only played a couple of games inside the UDES 15, it did feel like it was quite fluid. I thought it was a bit bizarre of Wargaming to kind of take away the capacity of you to manually enter the siege mode, but after playing it for a little bit, it kind of makes sense. And as of yet, I haven't really been annoyed by the feature, or I haven't encountered any game-breaking bugs that would stop me from being able to continue to play the game. Really, the only gameplay differences from this siege mode is that you're not exactly going to be able to elevate the tank up to crazy levels while you're driving along at 50 kilometers an hour. However, as soon as you are stationary, if you turn the turret behind the tank, you can actually use the hydropneumatic suspension to tilt the vehicle up as if it was going like this, and then you could put the turret behind you and elevate the turret as well to really get some funky shots at people who are above you. But of course, that does require you to be driving at about 23 or less kilometers an hour. So the UDES 15, it's an interesting one for me because I have no idea whether this vehicle is going to be the next best thing when it comes to tier 10 medium tank. There's enough downsides to this vehicle, like the shell velocity, the fact that it doesn't really have the best DPM or doesn't have the best speed, to kind of hold the tank back. But other things, like the vehicle's incredible concealment rating, which I was able to get up to near 40% when stationary and over 30% when moving, mean that this thing is going to be able to sneak into some of the most outrageous positions, and due to its crazy gun depression mechanics, be able to engage out from them as well. And so we'll have to see in the upcoming weeks and the different iterations of the test server what Wargaming have planned for changing the statistics of the UDES 15, but as it stands, this is definitely looking like one of the more interesting medium tanks in the game. And while I don't think it's probably going to break the game, it's certainly going to become the ace up the sleeve of any tanker who loves to work a ridgeline and play a support role at mid-range. And so anyway, that's it for me today, ladies and gents. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, give the video a thumbs up, but if you hated it, give it a thumbs down, and let me know what you think about the UDES 15. Do you think that this looks like the best thing since sliced bread, or do you think that this thing just looks absolutely ridiculous and you hate the idea of it going into the game and just what in hell is this really just storage? Are you really just storing things at the back of this tank? Oh my goodness. Is this enough to put you off it, ladies and gents? Because I think it kind of is for me. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.